So I want to start out today by making a distinction that I think is going to be helpful in kind of understanding where all of this economic theory is coming from. And let me do that by contrasting what you learn in developmental psychology, the kind of Bronfenbrenerian approach to understanding all the influences that might affect a child's developmental outcomes versus the kind of theory that we're generating in the class, supply and demand. We're about to do consumer choice. So one way of understanding the differences between these two approaches is with what some statisticians refer to as a distinction between reverse causal explanation and forward causal inference. And it's a fundamental difference between how economists go about their work and how developmental psychologists and some education researchers go about their work. Other disciplines are kind of somewhere in between. Experimental psychology is very much in the forward causal inference camp. But what are the differences here? You can think of the kind of Bronfenbrenner framework as classifying all of the influences and the interactions among the influences that would lead to a child at age 8 having high achievement scores or exhibiting problem behavior, a teenager exhibiting problem behavior or not, and an adult that is either healthy and productive, or in some way neither healthy nor unproductive, right? And if you start with where someone is and work backward, you ask for that child, what sort of family influences has that child had? What sort of, what Bronfenbrenner calls indirect environments might have played a role? Neighborhoods, for example, schools. And then finally, there's some even more macro set of influences, social and cultural values. So what this is usually done, this is usually used for classifying and investigating the relative importance of these kind of different factors, right? So statistically, there's some outcome for a child at age 10 or 20 or 30. And in a population sample, you try to characterize differences in the family environments of these people, differences in the indirect environments, and so forth. And then you come up with usually kind of a counting of variance. Where's the action? And you might find that the action for a particular kind of outcome is going to be at the neighborhood level, sometimes at the family level. But it's all about description of where a child ends up rather than any sort of prediction about what might happen in the future, right? So that's why this is called reverse causal explanation. And it, I don't know if people saw Drew Bailey's talk, but one of his one-liners was never ask a developmental psychologist if they can come up with an explanation for something. Because they always can. They can always come up with 10 explanations for something. But the point is that as a kind of scientific practice, one could argue this is not very helpful because for any particular outcome, there are thousands of potential combinations of these factors that might account for that outcome. And one person can favor one set of factors, one person can favor another set of factors. And there's not much in the statistics that they do that is going to have a clean differentiation between those two. So let's stop with that and then think about an approach that an economist would take, which is an approach that a physicist would take or a chemist would take. And that is one of forward causal inference. And for economists, the idea is to start with theory and use the theory to generate hypotheses that you can go out and test, right? So it's very much a forward looking process. You could imagine a forward causal process applied to these kinds of things. Let's manipulate a neighborhood environment with the moving to opportunity experiment. And then see 10 years later whether kids are turning out differently. Let's manipulate in Davy's first years, let's manipulate family income and see what the influence of family income really is, because we're manipulating family income in two groups, either without the extra family income or not, are designed to be equivalent. That's what random assignment is all about. So you can take that kind of approach here, but it's never done in developmental psychology. You're never generating predictions here. This is all about generating predictions. It's all about generating falsifiable predictions, right? If my theory says X should happen and Y should not happen, with a manipulation of price or quantity here, or preferences, we'll talk about that. With that manipulation, then you can go out and test to see whether the theory holds up. And this idea of predicting what should occur and what shouldn't occur is very important, because a good theory not only explains what you observe, but it explains what you don't observe, right? And you put those things on the line, you make predictions, you pre-register them. And if they're not supported, then your theory isn't supported. Here, there's no easy way of generating falsifiable predictions, right? Or generating non-predictions, things that shouldn't happen with whatever change you're thinking about. And if it does happen, then you don't have a very good theory. So that's the key distinction. So we're off in this forward causal inference world in economics. And what is going to be apparent, especially once we get into consumer theory, is that we're going to be making a series of highly unrealistic assumptions, right? And that bothers a lot of people. How can you describe the world, predict things in the world, if your assumptions are completely unrealistic? That we know that people can contradict them from time to time. That doesn't bother an economist. Their concern with a theory is, can it generate predictions that hold up when I go out and do a test of them? And the descriptive realism of a theory doesn't matter at all. Well, it doesn't matter much. But what really matters is this theory capturing enough of the essence of what the problem is, that it's generating predictions, in this case about changes in quantity in equilibrium in a market, changes in price in an equilibrium in a market. And then we're about to take a dive, which is at the market level, this demand curve is the market level, down to the individual household level, to see where that demand curve comes from, right? And we start out with these preferences and budget constraints. and build up from there. And the economist tries to see with a minimal set of assumptions what you can get out of that, what you can generate, what sort of predictions can you get, and is the theory sufficiently complicated to explain those things? If not, then maybe we have to complicate it a little bit more. But the idea is a simple theory is by far the best, and we complicate it only to the extent that this simple theory isn't giving us kind of predictions that we can test. So we'll see if people have questions about that, but I just wanted to give you a warning that we're about to dive into a theory, the consumer choice theory, that may appear very unrealistic, but an economist would say, so what?